When we go out to eat, we never agree on where to go.
I want burgers.
Pizza.
Tacos it is.
The one thing we do agree on is we all want unlimited high-speed data. That's why we switched to Metro PCS.
Stop by Metro PCS with the whole family and get 4 lines with unlimited LTE data for just $100, period. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figure it out.
Coverage not available in some areas. Offers require port and of number not currently active on T-Mobile network. During congestion, the fraction of customers using more than 35 gigs per month may notice reduced speeds. Video streams at up to 40p. No tethering. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, and welcome to the Race Haven Radio Show and Podcast. This is solutions-focused dialogue about race in America. My name is Scott Speed, and I am the facilitator of the dialogue. This is episode 4 of Race Haven. And today we're going to dialogue about Beyonce's Super Bowl performance in which she paid homage to the Black Panther Party, a black nationalist and socialist organization founded in 1966, and all of the backlash that has come from that performance throughout traditional news media and social media. For example, former NYC and Republican presidential candidate Rudy Giuliani says that Beyonce's performance of Formation was an attack on police. Do you agree? Were the Black Panthers heroes, or were they a hate group similar to the KKK? And was the performance disrespectful towards the original women of the Black Panther Party? Today, we'll explore these questions and topics and more. So call in now to share your perspective on these topics by dialing 929-477-4107, then press 1, and I will know that you want to speak. If you're listening online, be sure to visit and join our Race Haven Facebook group and share any thoughts, questions, or comments and dialogue with our online community. So what I'd like to do next is introduce our guest host for today, Dr. Nzinga Harrison. Get her on here. Good afternoon, Dr. Harrison. How are you?
Good, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
So let me ask, should we go by Dr. Harrison or Nzinga during this podcast?
I'm happy to be Nzinga during this podcast.
Awesome. Okay, so before we get into our dialogue today, I want to first give our listeners an idea about how we know each other, and then I'll give you an opportunity to tell everyone a little bit about your background.
Okay.
So my wife and I moved to Atlanta in 2007, and Nzinga, her husband, was our realtor, okay, and he helped us buy the home that we currently live in. And we were able to spend some time with them and get to know their family in the early months that we were here in Atlanta. And I really fell in love with the family and Nzinga, her personality, her spirit, and everything about her was just very, very attractive. And she was just, one of the first people that I met here in Atlanta, both my wife and I, that we said, wow, she's amazing. She's really cool. And we got to know them a little bit more as time has gone along. And then in 2014, when I got the idea for starting the Race Haven Facebook group, I reached out to Nzinga because I noticed that she also seemed to have the same pains that I had. And what I mean by that is right around the time when the Michael Brown Ferguson issue was really, hot. I was posting a lot of thoughts and questions and just questioning things and just kind of being who I am around the issue. I noticed that Nzinga was doing the same. I noticed that she had a higher level of consciousness about the issue, and she was constructive about it. So what I did was, in my frustration about how I saw those issues being addressed, I wanted to do something about it because I was tired of the polarization. I was tired of this us against them mentality that I saw being forged through news media and social media. So what I did was I created Race Haven, solutions-focused dialogue about race in America as a Facebook group, and I asked Dr. Nzinga Harrison to co-facilitate the group with me because I knew that I would need some help, and I knew that she would bring the expertise and the experience as well as the tact and just the overall her overall personality would be a great complement to what we were trying to do. So she agreed, and before I even launched, she agreed, and then we launched together. That was the fall of 2014, and we've been facilitating that online community since then. And I more recently decided to launch the podcast a few weeks ago. And I sent her a text to let her know, and she gave me her blessing. So this is her first time joining us on the show. So I'm excited to have her. Nzinga, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
First of all, that was such a lovely recap, Scott. So thanks for that. It was my experience as well, and I was really kind of proud and encouraged that you invited me to be the co-facilitator for Physicians for Criminal Justice Reform. It was interesting that you said you thought that I was enlightened and constructive as I was approaching these issues on my Facebook page, because in honesty, I think I probably felt what many mothers of Black sons felt, which was hopeless and devastated and very emotional. So to give background, I think probably the way I was able to present those, kind of that feeling of emotional out of controlness in a constructive way is based on my professional training. So just as a bit of background, I am a physician. So I have to, give shout outs to my alma maters. I did undergraduate school at Howard University, Washington, D.C., and then went up the East Coast to the University of Pennsylvania for medical school, after which point I decided to specialize in psychiatry. So after earning my M.D. at the University of Pennsylvania, I came down to Emory University and did my specialty training in psychiatry and addiction medicine. And one of the hallmarks of psychiatric training is being able to recognize when your emotions are influencing your thinking and your behavior, and how your emotions are influencing your thinking and your behavior. And so I really had to work hard to use those skills as I was posting on my Facebook page, kind of in an effort to manage my own feelings about it, but also to invite dialogue, which you're really the king of inviting dialogue rather than conflict over these very difficult issues. And so I brought those skills, or at least attempted to bring those skills to Race Haven, and I attempt to bring those skills to everybody that I come in contact with, friends, family, foes, supporters, and enemies as I move through my life. And that brings us to today.
Awesome. Thanks for that wonderful overview. And, the shout out to Philly, University of Penn. That's my hometown where I'm from. So we definitely connected on that level as well. Mm-hmm. And I will say, you made a point that you were, sharing your emotions. And what I could say about that is, again, you did it in a way that was inviting in terms of, allowing other people to see into your world. I know a lot of people, they're afraid to necessarily be transparent and vulnerable on social media. And I could appreciate the fact that you were doing that, because that's what I aim to do as well. I know that I have a very diverse group of friends on social media, and I know that some of the things I post and say may be uncomfortable, but I feel like it's necessary if they want to get to really know me. And I feel you kind of take that same approach. And I know you have a diverse, range of professional colleagues, friends, as well as personal friends on the network as well. So with that being said, let's get into it. You mentioned dialogue and my passion for dialogue. And it's true, and it's because of my studies, while pursuing my doctorate degree, that I learned about what true dialogue is. And ever since learning about that, in the context of, my concentration for my doctorate is organizational leadership. So we study a lot of, organization and corporation, big business behavior, management styles, and different things like that. And I learned about how these large corporations were using the MIT has a lab where they teach dialogue and systems thinking. And when I learned about systems thinking, I learned about dialogue in the business context, I immediately saw how it could have an impact on the social context. And they also speak about those things in their teachings as well. And I immediately began to think about how it could be used towards solving some of the problems socially that we face as a country. And that's kind of the genesis behind what motivates me. So what I want to do is right at the beginning, explain to our audience what dialogue is. And during each show, I'm going to share a different definition or example of dialogue so that our listeners can continue to learn and grow as they follow the show. So the example that I'm using that I'm about to explain. It comes from the book Dialogue and the Art of Thinking Together by William Isaacs. Dialogue is a conversation with a center, not sides. It is a way of taking the energy of our differences and channeling it towards something that has never been created before. It lifts us out of polarization and into a greater common sense. People from different cultures speak different languages, bring different underlying assumptions, carry different ways of thinking and acting. Dialogue can enable people to bring out these differences and begin to make sense of them, fostering communication and understanding among people. It does this by helping create settings in which their differences can be safely and consciously reflected upon. So, Race Haven is one of those settings. It's a safe place for people from diverse ethnic, religious, cultural, and political backgrounds to bring their race-based perspectives, questions, assumptions, frustrations, and experiences to engage in thoughtful, honest dialogue in an effort to lead a movement towards racial harmony in America. So, before we jump into it, here's our framework for authentic dialogue, and this is the framework that Nzinga and I will use, as well as any caller who chooses to call in. This is the framework. Participants listen with a sense of curiosity and ask questions to uncover the underlying assumptions and beliefs behind someone's statements. Participants are willing to communicate their thoughts openly and honestly while putting aside emotions, defensiveness, and a desire to be right. I know those things are really hard, but it's a part of the exercise. And participants approach someone who sees a problem differently, not as an adversary, but as a colleague in common pursuit of better solutions. So welcome to the dialogue. Are you ready, Nzinga?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So the following is from a Washington Post article that was written on February 8th, and I'm going to read what was written. That former mayor of NYC and former Republican candidate Rudy Giuliani said, and then I'm going to get your feedback on that. So, Rudy Giuliani, a one-time Republican presidential contender, say on Monday for what he described as an attack on police officers during her Super Bowl halftime show performance. This is football, not Hollywood, and I thought it was really outrageous that she used it as a platform to attack police officers who are the people who protect her and protect us and keep us alive, he said during an appearance on the Fox News channel. And what we should be doing, and what we should be doing in the African American community and in all communities, is build up respect for police officers and focus on the fact that when something does go wrong, okay, we'll work on that. But the vast majority of police officers risk their lives to keep us safe. The critique came in response to a question from Fox News anchor Anna Koyman, who appeared to suggest hypocrisy on Beyonce's part. Her question was this: Beyonce got a police escort there, and then she gives a salute to the Black Lives Matter movement. It was a nod to 1966 founding of the Black Panther Party. What did you think of that? Koyman asked. So, my question to you, Nzinga, is this: was Beyonce's performance and her song Formation an attack on police, and is the message in the video divisive?
So, and of course, this is my opinion. I cannot speak about Beyonce's motivation. What I love about this song's Formation and what I loved about that halftime performance, first of all, is that it was just amazing. If you really look at the halftime performance, it had nothing to do with police, right? It was Beyonce with backup dancers in a dance-off with Bruno Mars. And the overarching theme, actually, of that performance was really marriage equality. It was love for all people, no matter what. That was the overarching theme of the Super Bowl performance. Now, our media outlets are designed kind of to be inflammatory and bring our emotions on high because that's how they keep us engaged. If you look at the Black Lives Matter movement and you look at the imagery that Beyonce put in the video for this song, and so people are wrapping the video and the halftime performance into kind of one experience. It's not a message against police officers. It is a message against police brutality. And I think if we kind of approach this issue, with our emotions on the forefront, but being able to look at why we're having the emotions that we're having. I don't think there would be one person of any gender, race, ethnicity, police officer or not, military or not, Republican, Democratic, like all of those buckets that we use to divide ourselves. I don't think there's one person that would stand up and say, I support police brutality. And I don't think there's one person who would stand up and say, I support citizens getting killed by police officers in situations where there was a different option, right? But because this issue is presented to us through a racial lens, people feel like they have to fall on the side or through, disrespecting police that protect us, because it is true. Many of us have experienced protection from the police, but also many of us have experienced brutality and lack of protection from the police. I think if we could just unify around the real message and stop letting the message get lost in all of these red herrings that are really designed to build viewership and readership in the media, the real message is that if a police officer had an option to not kill a person, would we want the police officer to take that option? And I don't know that there's anyone who would call in to say, no, I would rather they just kill a person.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question. Why do you think, and I know these are tough questions for you. You can't speak for everyone, but just from your perspective, why do you think we continue to fall into, when I say we, I would say the majority of Americans, or just I guess Americans in general, continue to fall into the media polarization? It seems like I see a lot of people speaking to that in what you just said. However, as I survey social media and I read things from people, of several different descents, I get the sense that there's people that really run with those media themes and really believe that they are, that word is everything and is true. I don't see it. I guess I have a hard time seeing people digging deeper or thinking critically around these issues, and it's kind of a gap I see. Do you see that? And this, yes, why do you think that is?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can even bring that into the realm of fact, right? Once people believe what they believe, it's very difficult to get them to consider alternatives, no matter what topic you're talking about. So this is where I fall back on my training as a physician with my specialty in psychiatry. We'll do a little bit of neurobiology. If you take, because it's not just Americans, it's humans, number one, period, and it's because humans share brain neurobiology with all other animals. So I'll describe what I'm talking about. You can really kind of, as basic neurobiological principle, divide the brain into two main parts. You have your cortex, which is the outer covering. That's what everybody thinks of as the brain. Like if you show a model of a brain and, it's like that, grayish, brownish color with all of the folds and ridges and hills and valleys. That's what people think of as your brain. That's actually only the outer layer covering of our brain. That's our cortex. And if you look at the part of the cortex that's right underneath your forehead, that's called the prefrontal cortex. That's where our judgment is. That's where our thinking is. That's where our decision making is. That's where our impulse control is. If you pull off the cortex and look, kind of like connect a line that goes through your ear and down through the top of your head, and you get right to the center, like in the middle of your brain, that's what we call the subcortical area. It's underneath the cortex, and that's the part of the brain that we share with all animals. That is the part of the brain that is responsible for survival. So that's where fear arises. That's where paranoia arises. That's where your fight or flight response arises. It is literally designed to keep you alive and to keep your species going. So when you look at the way that our brains have evolved, our deep brain, our subcortical area, the part that we share with all animals, is not under our voluntary control. It is constantly responding to the environment, and it's constantly responding to kind of to internal sensations. Like if your heart is beating fast, that part of your brain will say, we're in danger, because that's what it means when our heart beats fast. If your mouth gets dry, that part of your brain will say, we're afraid, we're in danger, because that's what it means when our mouth is dry. If you have had scary experiences with police officers and you see a police officer, your heart will race, your mouth will get dry, because that part of your brain involuntarily is sending the message to your cortex that we're in danger. And then it's the cortex's job to respond quickly without questioning that information, right? So I'll give you an example. If it was way, way, way back in the day and you're in the jungle and you see a tiger and your deep brain sends that message forward to your prefrontal cortex and says, we are in danger, your prefrontal cortex doesn't have the luxury to question that. It can't say, well, is it really a tiger? Because this might be a tiger that humans have trained and he might not be dangerous. No, you're dead, right? You're dead if your prefrontal cortex takes the time to question that. And so the way our brains are formed is that emotional, fear-based information is automatically more important and more believable than rational thinking. And when your emotions spike, the MRI scans show when your deep brain is really engaged and on fire, that prefrontal cortex, which allows you to think rationally about things and consider other alternatives, is dark. It is shut down by that emotional brain because the emotional brain is stronger. So when you have topics like the one we're talking about today, so that was just kind of like human neurobiology, bring it into the American history context. And I know people will be like, oh my God, here she's going to go and say the word slavery. Yes, slavery, okay? That is what this country was built on. And you look at the atrocities of slavery, there's generational trauma that comes not only to Black people, but especially to Black people, but also to those other people who tried to be allies to slaves, right? They've also kind of had those generational traumas that informs what the brain considers to be dangerous. And so it has become dangerous in this country to talk about anything associated with race because our history with race is so atrocious. So you mentioned the word race, and that emotional part of the brain engages and sends forward to the prefrontal cortex, this is dangerous. We are in danger. And that literally neurobiologically reduces a person's ability to consider alternatives to the idea that this is a dangerous topic. And so that's what you see people responding to when they see a performance like Beyonce's performance. First of all, everyone's guard was down. Right? Everybody at the Super Bowl, everybody who was watching the Super Bowl, nobody thought that the scary topic of race was about to be thrown in their faces. So your guard is down, and it's like, I am in a safe place in the comfort of my own home, enjoying this time with my friends, and Beyonce introduced this dangerous, dangerous thing. And so the emotional response to that is one of feeling betrayed, which the SNL skit portrayed beautifully, right? That is just, I felt betrayed. I didn't think Beyonce would do that to me. I didn't think the NFL would let Beyonce do that to me, right? You brought this dangerous topic into my safe space and made me watch this performance that I was not prepared for.
Wow. That's some amazing context that you just provided to all of us. And it's really deep, and it's interesting that you would mention just the word race because of all of the history that the baggage that comes along with it. And it's funny because I've actually recently been thinking if the name of this show, Race Haven, and I know it does, it probably turns people off just from the name alone. And it's also interesting because I noticed that when I post certain things on Facebook, some of the responses I get is always like a similar theme from people who are frustrated and just want this to go away. You know, they want race conversations to go away. And it's like a similar theme type conversation, especially when I jump on other people's threads with people who don't know me and don't know the way I think about these issues. And they always kind of come back at me when I inquire and ask questions with the same, I would say, the defensive line of thinking. And it's always similar in the things that they say. So I find that really interesting. My last question on this topic for you, and also before I say that, if anyone else wants to jump in and provide a different perspective, than what Dr. Nzinga is sharing with us, please call in now at 929-477-4107, then press 1. We welcome all callers, especially contrasting perspectives, because we learn by processing contrasting perspectives better. So I hope that we can get some contrasting perspectives on the show today. But if not, no worries. I have some Facebook posts that some of my Facebook friends have, shared, where I'm going to share those as well. So with that being said, my final question was this. Why do you think one of the biggest things in terms of this baggage, it kind of goes towards police? Why do you think Mayor Giuliani felt like her supporting the Black Lives Matter movement and other conservative outlets that I've read or watched in videos and conservative commentators, they felt like she disrespected police? Why do we keep hearing that theme of, whenever someone stands up and supports, let's say, Black Lives Matter, or even in the formation video, the imagery of the little boy standing up with his hands up and the police officers, standing with their hands up, a lot of people took offense to that. And also it says, stop shooting us. And a lot of people felt like she's fanning the flames of the tension between the African-American community and police officers. What's your perspective on that?
Of course it was fanning the flames. That was the reason she put the scene. Well, okay, that's the reason I believe she put the scene in the video. Like I said before, I'm not in Beyonce's brain. But the reason you put that scene in the video is to engage the emotions, right? And so whereas there's a group of people that experience that as a danger signal, I'm being attacked, right? She's attacking police. She's attacking order. She's attacking, decreasing criminals. They're just trying to keep the country safe, and she's attacking them for risking their lives to keep the country safe. That's a defensive emotional narrative that allows you not to look beneath the surface. And then there's a group of people that still, she didn't engage the prefrontal cortex. She engaged the subcortical area, the emotional part of the brain, for people that have felt like, I have been silenced. This is what I have been feeling. Our Black boys are being shot down, and it's not just Black boys who are being brutalized. It's really Black boys definitely, but there's a huge socioeconomic component. And then there's also just kind of like a harsh policing culture in this country right now. But people who have felt like, I have not been able to say the words, or if I said the words, people were not able to hear me. And the emotion that they generated when they watched that scene was one of relief and one of reinforcement and one that somebody actually cares enough to hear my experience. And this is another thing that we really have difficulty with as humans, and it goes back to neurobiology. As humans, it is very difficult for us to consider the experience of others that don't mirror our own experience. And so it's hard for me to believe that you experienced this situation this way, because that doesn't fit within the context of anything that I've ever experienced. And so the way that you defend against really not being able to understand it is to say it's not true. So you say police brutality disproportionately affects people of color, disproportionately affects people who are poor. If that hasn't been my experience, I will say that's not right. And I'll say, well, here are the statistics. And if you can show those statistics outside of an emotional context, you have a better chance of that person being able to consider those statistics. The problem is we're getting these statistics through our social media, always in an emotionally charged context, right? So you see Beyonce in a outfit that's an ode to the Black Panthers, and it says police brutality disproportionately affects Black boys. Well, guess what you did? Once you showed that image, you completely took the prefrontal cortex dark and disengaged that person's ability to consider that rational information, because their emotional brain is in control just by having shown that image.
Wow. Thank you for that perspective. Very interesting. And my follow-up question is naturally, what's the solution? But I want you to hold off on that because we have a solution segment at the end where you can offer up several solutions. We have a caller right now that wants to jump in, so I'm going to bring this caller on to see if they would like to share their perspective or ask a question. If the caller could share their first name and where they're calling from. Right now, I know that you're calling from an area code 770. And the last four digits are 8725. Welcome to the dialogue. Who are we speaking with?
Mr. Scott Speed, this is Alan Halloman III, also known as MCAH3. How you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing well. Welcome to the dialogue, MCAH3. What do you got for us?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for putting on this particular dialogue and your vision. I'm telling you, it's really going to open up a lot of people's eyes. You know, you and I have had some conversations in the past, and I really appreciate your perspective, and I thank you for appreciating my perspective. I really don't have anything to say on the other side of the coin other than this country really needs to be awakened. And as Nina Simone, have you ever heard of her, Mr. Steve?
Yes.
Nina Simone, the performer. She was talking about it is a duty of people that are in entertainment and in music to go ahead and bring out these things in their performances, and that is just what Beyonce did. And I want to thank Sister Nzinga for giving us a 30-minute, I would say, class on psychology. I tell you what, that my goodness, that was some real good stuff. So, Scott, keep up the good work, man. And I don't think Beyonce disrespected or owes America an apology at all. I really don't think she owes America an apology at all. And Rudy Giuliani was talking about this was the Super Bowl. This is not Hollywood. Well, guess what? This is 2016, not 66 or 67. Back to you, Mr. Speed.
Thank you. Thank you for that perspective, Alan, and thanks for calling in.
Yes, sir.
All right. So I want to punt to a Facebook question. We have Yerusa from Facebook, and I hope I said your name correct. And if I did, I apologize. You can correct me later. But Yerusa had a question for you and Nzinga. She said, in respect to safe space, why is there less of a backlash when Kendrick Lamar performs something just as controversial at the Grammys? Is it about safe space / not expecting to have issues of race come up, or are we programmed to criticize black women more than a black man?
So I think it's multifactorial. I would say Beyonce is more of a crossover artist than Kendrick Lamar is. So her fan base is dramatically bigger and also dramatically more diverse. And when you look at probably how Beyonce's fans and kind of just like the general public experiences Beyonce, it is as a safe person. Like they probably experience Beyonce as a woman superstar first, and only is it a second thought that she's black. And so part of the betrayal, which again, Saturday Night Live did beautifully, but part of the betrayal was that they didn't expect that from Beyonce. It was a shock. And then also the space, the NFL, the Super Bowl halftime show has always been like a very, very, very safe space for everyone. And so that she took that safe space and kind of gave a message, like I said, when everybody's guard was down and nobody was ready for it and didn't expect it from her because of the persona that she otherwise carries publicly, the way that people experience her, that makes it even more jarring. It's like, to put it in a different context, if you were to go to the doctor and the doctor said to you, have you had any high-risk behaviors for HIV? You would be like, wow, that's an uncomfortable question, but I expect the doctor to ask me that. Whereas if you went to the grocery store and you were checking out and the cashier said, have you had any high-risk behaviors for HIV? Your emotional brain would engage with betrayal and shock that this person completely stepped out of their role to breach your boundary. And so I think that's what people were experiencing from Beyonce. It was like being at the cash register and the clerk saying, have you been tested for HIV? Kendrick Lamar, on the other hand, has a smaller base of fans that actually expects this type of content from him because this is the type of content that he's been giving as an artist. Now, if you looked at the faces of the people in the audience, they were definitely shocked. And a lot of people did not know how to respond. And it was really just, you get two fear responses. It's called fight or flight, right? But the third one is freeze. And so what you see in response to Beyonce's performance is a fear response, which is fight. And if you looked in real time at the Grammy audience as they panned when Kendrick Lamar was giving his performance, you saw a fear response, but it was freeze. And so it was just like shock and I don't really know what to do, and then just kind of blended with the crowd and clapped for those people who had kind of been caught off guard. So the response is the same. It's fear and it's shock. But one, within the context of not being when I expected this to happen from a person I didn't expect to do it, and the other to be kind of within the context where I know that this is the content of this person's music, and so not as shocking.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So I just want to say from my own personal perspective that, just to be transparent, when I saw Beyonce's performance and when I saw her music video, it gave me chills. It's always empowering, for me to see an African American person using a platform that's being, I guess, broadcast to the masses in a way to edify the African American experience or to acknowledge the African American experience in America, because it's one that's unique. And I feel like, I hope that as a country we can get to the point where people don't take it personally if it's not geared towards them, and just appreciate it like art, or in what it is, and appreciate and also understand historical context and understand when you have a group of people who are coming from up under centuries of oppression, that one of the ways that you come out of that is you have to be aggressive, I guess, in edifying yourself and edifying others like you the best way that you can. And I got the same emotional feeling from, watching Kendrick Lamar's performance. I wish I could have seen it live. But, I mean, it was amazing. It was amazing. And it's amazing how they use their artistry to paint a picture. And Kendrick is a genius in terms of being a mix between a rapper, a poet, a musician, an actor, drama professional. I mean, he just brings it on so many different levels with the visual imagery that he was able to, share with us in that performance. And I just thought it was magnificent. So one of the things
I will reinforce that, Scott. I literally put a Facebook status on whatever, my Facebook page, obviously. It was a Facebook status after the Kendrick Lamar performance. And I said, wow, that performance felt like freedom to me. It felt like the freedom to be unapologetically Black. And so if you look at slavery and the civil rights era and the Jim Crow era and the hard on crime era and the war on drugs era, really the common theme through that has been that non-whites have to integrate into white society by not being seen, by not standing out, by not challenging the status quo, by not standing up for your own rights. And so I saw the Beyonce performance and Kendrick Lamar's performance as back-to-back examples that we are now in a time where we can be unapologetically Black. And that does not mean hating anything that's not Black. That just means just like you're proud to be Jewish and proud of your Jewish heritage and everything that means, I'm proud to be Black and proud of my Black heritage and everything that means. You're proud of your Scottish heritage. You're proud of your Hispanic heritage. You're proud to be a woman. You're proud to be an American. Like, we can be proud to be all of these things without that meaning somebody else's other is not as important and they shouldn't be proud in it. And so I think you say, should Beyonce apologize to America? No, Beyonce has done America a huge favor because she has put the issue on the table in a way that people who would not otherwise be talking about it are talking about it. Now, if we can change the quality of that dialogue to be, I see that, like you said, I really want to reinforce, I loved it that you said, I wish people could just accept it for the beautiful thing that it was, even if it wasn't for them. That's the place we have to get to. We have to get to the place where I can go to the Holocaust Museum and say, even though that wasn't for me, this is a beautiful display of the pride that our Jewish brothers and sisters have today. Even though that Beyonce performance wasn't for me, that was a beautiful display of proud Black women doing their thing in front of a huge crowd.
You know, that's an interesting point because, and it speaks to, you know, getting to the root causes of the issues that we're speaking about. And one of the reasons why we keep facing these tensions, what you just said in the examples you gave about being proud of the Holocaust and the survivorship that those individuals went through, or other ethnicities and their struggle or their successes. One of the things that I've noticed is that majority race in America, they don't necessarily see and understand the African American struggle the way that we do as African Americans, because they've been told a different story. And that's why I'm starting to ask questions on Facebook. Like, I wonder if my friends who grew up in majority white schools, or as I prefer to say, Euro-American schools or Euro-American communities, I wonder if they understand African American history the way that I understand it. Because I think that if they did, they would have a different perspective when these type of things happen, as opposed to one of being offended, or as opposed to having one of not being able to appreciate it or feeling attacked. And a perfect example of that is the imagery of the Black Panthers. And because she chose to channel the Black Panthers in her Super Bowl performance and, recognizing them because, A, it was also the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Black Panthers, and the Super Bowl was held in the Bay Area where the Black Panthers were founded, she took that as an opportunity to pay homage to an organization that meant so much and represented so much pride and so much empowerment in a time when it was sorely needed in the African American community. So what troubles me is that her doing that has offended people. And what troubles me about it is that there's people who are, as I survey the media and social media, there are people who are holding on to this rhetoric about the Black Panthers being, a hate group or similar to the KKK or terrorists and all these different things without including the other side of what the Black Panther was. And we're going to get into how some of those statements are incorrect as well, but not even including the empowerment, the social programs, the root cause of why they even formed in the first place, which was self-defense and fighting, racism and abuse and supremacy. So it just troubles me that, and I question why, and this is why we do this, is I can't wait till we get to the day to where we can really and get to the root of our and accept America's history without the emotions, the defensiveness, etc., and try to understand the African American perspective so that you're not feeling defensive and etc. And I also hope that some of those people who may feel in opposition to some of the things that I may say or some of your perspectives would call in and share their perspective so that we can unpack, during this show. And we actually have a caller. And let me give out the number, and then I'm going to bring this caller on because maybe this caller, will bring a different perspective. But if anyone wants to call in, the number is 929-477-4107. Press 1 to let us know that you want to speak. And right now I'm going to go to a caller whose area code is 415. The last four numbers are 8760. Hello, caller. What is your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, Scott. This is Rich Russo calling from the San Francisco Bay Area. How are you?
I'm doing well, Rich. Welcome to the dialogue. What would you like to share?
Thank you. First of all, my thanks, Dr. Harrison. I also appreciate the crash course neurobiology historical perspective.
My pleasure.
One for your ability to truncate it, but also I think you're bringing in a really good cross section of views here. I think there's obviously some historical stuff going on that we're talking about, and also the individual reaction is really important to that, especially the fight or flight and the fear. And that's been really interesting to me with all this. You know, to take it sort of point by point with the Beyonce halftime show, I feel like we are all reacting to a reaction that was based on, to be blunt, willful ignorance. I think the way that it was portrayed on Fox News was a portrayal that is a bit of what they do. It's a bit of the business they're in, right? There's a way where they have become known, and some could argue that some quote left-wing media have the same issues, but Fox in particular has a history, a well-documented history of going with a bit of a fear-based tactic. And so even if you watch back the specific portions of that Fox reporting, one of the anchor people says something to the effect of, I couldn't even understand what the lyrics were, but I hear it's that she was saying, you know, X, Y, Z about police. And so just that alone, the conversation they're having is based on something that's not true. That's just simply not in the lyrics. There's some imagery in the video, and anyone would be hard-pressed to actually point to some specific imagery in the halftime itself. Mm-hmm. So there's a convoluting of what's being presented and the reaction to it. And then there's this kind of conversation that we're all in reaction to that. Whereas most folks that are willing to speak publicly, I guess it's not surprising to me, Scott, that you haven't found someone who is ready to come on and talk about how the halftime show was offensive, or it was this, or it was that. In part because I think that's, you know, a difficult position to speak out about. I think there can be fear there. But it also makes me curious about, did folks actually respond this way? Is there a huge portion of people who are actually, quote-unquote, offended by this, or who are scared by this, or was it just part of a larger kind of a hodgepodge of things going on in that halftime show? So I find it interesting that the conversation is coming from a place of fear, when I feel like the conversation was begun that way intentionally, as far as the Fox News reporting goes and the former Mayor Giuliani's comments.
Interesting. I appreciate you pointing those things out, Rich. I have a comment, but I want to let Dr. Nzinga jump in. Do you have any comments or anything to say to what Rich said?
Yeah. So, Rich, thanks for your comments, too. I think one of the things I really appreciated about Beyonce's performance, and forgive me, I like keep saying, like, okay, I'm a psychiatrist. It really was a Rorschach block, right? It was a Rorschach. And so if you know what the Rorschach is, that's when they show you a random ink blot on a card, and you have to say, what does that ink blot bring up for you? What emotions does it bring up? What thoughts does it bring up? And really the only thing that tells us is, how have your life experiences informed the way you interpret the world, right? Because the ink blot is not actually anything. It is literally an ink blot, and you will get one person that will see a spot, and it'll be very scary, and it'll represent scary things that happened to them in childhood, and you'll show the same ink spot to another person, and it'll be like, oh, that looks like the horse I used to ride when I went on the beach with my family when I was little, right? Completely and utterly only informed by what their previous experiences has been is the response to the Rorschach blot. And Beyonce's performance was exactly that, as was Kendrick Lamar's performance. It was, given this imagery, what does that pull up for you? And the only thing that can be based on is the beliefs you already hold based on the experiences you have already had. And it's purely emotional. So when you see Fox News and the person says, I couldn't even hear the words, but I thought she said, kill all police because they're terrible, right? She didn't have to hear the words, because what she saw based on her current set of beliefs and her life experiences meant to her, kill all police because they're terrible, without even hearing the words, even if that wasn't the message that was to be sent. So reinforcing what Rich said, and falling back to what I said earlier when I said we have Beyonce to thank, because she has shown a mirror at us, and if we will let ourselves look in that mirror, we can see how we really feel about things, and if we're really willing to try to accept the experience of others that has not been our own experience, and to say, oh, wow, I thought that because of my experiences. You thought that because of your experiences. The reality is somewhere in the middle. How do we get to that, and how do we turn that into what we want this country to be as opposed to what it currently is?
Absolutely. And what I'll say, and thank you, Rich, for calling in and commenting. And what I want to say is, I know that some people may think that it's naive to think that, I'll get someone whose values and beliefs may fall in line with what they say on Fox News and these various people. But what I'm trying to create with Race Haven is a platform where all of us can come together to dialogue around the things that frustrate us, because the same issues frustrate us all in terms of race. They just frustrate us in different ways. And in order for us, and again, I don't want to totally get to solutions because we're going to have a solution segment, but I just want to say that, this is a open platform. Race Haven, the Facebook page, as well as Race Haven, the podcast and radio show, I welcome all perspectives because I want to hear them. I learn from them. I grow from them. And the thing about when people say that, when I hear willful ignorance, because I've heard it a lot when we've had these discussions, especially on Facebook, I have a different take on it. My take is that there's some underlying beliefs and fears and assumptions and concerns that force people to gravitate toward that message, because Fox News has a huge following, and other conservative outlets have a huge following of people who this message or that particular message speaks to. So what I'm hoping that we can do is, I'm hoping that we can attract some people that are attracted to that, those outlets, to come into this space that will talk with us, dialogue with us. Let's share our thoughts, our concerns, our assumptions, so that we can start peeling back the layers and getting to the underlying core values, beliefs, and fears and concerns. Because at the root of it all, I believe that we all want the same thing. We all want safety, we all want equality, and we all want the ability to pursue happiness. And I feel like if that's what we all want, I definitely believe that it's possible that we can work together to get there. So that's what Race Haven is all about. So I welcome anyone, who has quote unquote conservative views or any views, which personally I don't subscribe to any of that. I'm me and I have my views, and I just want to talk to people. I want to put aside those labels. Put aside the labels and let's just talk. Let's dialogue. So with that being said, I want to transition to the second question, which is, were the Black Panthers heroes, or were they a hate group similar to the KKK? Now, this is a sentiment that's been going around, and a lot of debate has been going online about this. And Nzinga, I know that you have a unique perspective because your father is a former Black Panther. So I would like for you to share your perspective on this this debate and rhetoric that's been going on around the Black Panthers being terrorists, being a hate group, similar, and in the same breath that people are using it, like literally they are the same as the KKK. Why do so many Americans think that?
Well, I do have to first say my father was the commander of the Black Panther militia in the 1990s in Indianapolis, which is not the Black Panther Party, although they shared, the similar goal of kind of fortifying Black people and civil rights. That said, I think the answer to your question, again, I keep coming back to fear. The reason a lot of people think the Black Panthers was a hate group is because that was the narrative they were taught when they were growing up, right? And so it was interesting when the Black Panther movie came out, and it was really good. I would recommend that everybody go see it. It was actually one of my white friends, this girl, I'll shout her out, named Inslee Real, who is awesome, that sent Joel and me an email and was like, hey, do you guys want to go see this together? So we went. It was the three of us. We saw the movie. It was fantastic. After the movie, she said, what's really interesting that I realized while I was watching that movie, she grew up, middle class suburban Atlanta, white, growing up. And she said, I had a really negative reaction to black people with afros because when I was growing up, I was taught that black people with afros were probably part of the Black Panthers and that the Black Panthers were dangerous. Right? She was a little girl. She was a little girl, and that was laid down kind of in her psyche from the time she was younger. And then as she grew up and she started to have different experiences and interactions with people of different faiths and different ethnicities and different races, then she was able to start forming her own worldview. But it was all the way until she was watching this movie that she was kind of able to put her hand on why she would have that negative fear reaction when she saw black people with big afros. She didn't even know. It didn't even rise to her level of consciousness, right? It was part of her childhood programming. Now, if she had stayed in a monochromatic existence where she was only exposed to people like her, of the same socioeconomic class, of the same race, of the same ethnicity, she would have never had any reason to challenge that worldview that was given to her by her parents. And so we have to recognize, even in people our age, and I'm pushing 40, right? Our age and most certainly older were raised by people who had the view of organized black people equals danger, period. Regardless of what the real goals of the organization were, which was equality and, you know, bringing down racial hatred and stopping the killing and the abuse of black people, right? Those were the real goals of the Black Panther organization. But just seeing organized black people equaled danger. And a lot of people our age and older were programmed with that message when they were younger and have not necessarily had experiences that make them challenge that. And the opposite may have had experiences that reinforces that, because after the Black Panthers left, then it came the 80s, which was the time of gangs, right? So gangs reinforce. Organized black people in groups equals danger, right? And then here came the war on drugs, and the war on drugs put lots of black people in prison and reinforced the image of organized black people or big groups of black people equal criminal or equal danger. And so there's a lot of narrative in our society, starting from when people are very young, that plants that seed and then nourishes that seed. And it's dialogue like this that kind of, you know, stops the nourishment of that seed. And then when you look at people who are younger than us, and we're working hard not to raise our children with those narratives, and by us, I don't mean black people, I mean like all around the world, this whole revolution for equality, marriage equality, race equality, gender equality, socioeconomic equality, this whole revolution for equality is a group of people who are seeking to program our children with a different message, but that's the young people. The people our age and older have been programmed with that message, and it's hard to refute.
Interesting. Well, that's why I love the internet, because I feel like it's going to happen faster. We're in an information age, and it's only but so long that people can run from the truth. So I see the shift, and it makes me hopeful because I do see that shift. I want to share a couple of statements that two of my conservative Facebook friends that I know identify as conservatives posted in response to these questions when I asked on Facebook. One of them, a gentleman by the name of Jay, he wrote, "To me, there is no difference from the KKK or Black Panthers. We don't need hate groups." And then another one by the name of Pat, he stated that, "My point about the Black Panthers and the KKK, they both fall into the same category. Both believe they are right. Both claim to do good. Both claim to be protecting their own. Two wrongs don't make a right. While I am sure both believe in their causes, I cannot support either one." You have any comments to those statements? You don't have to. I'm just asking if you do.
No, I definitely have comments to those statements. They are based on a lack of understanding, right? So for the first person to say the Black Panthers and the KKK are no different, they're both hate groups. The Black Panthers did not preach hate for any group of people. The Black Panthers preached Black empowerment and the white establishment, those whites, and, you know, I don't paint a broad brush. I'm not going to be like white people this and white people that. Those whites who were part of the oppressive establishment experienced that as hate, but it was hate for oppression. It was not hate for white people, okay? The KKK actually is built on hatred for black people. So that distinction is very important. When you get to the second comment, which is they both fall into the same category because they both believe they were right, they both claim to do good, they both claim to be protecting their own, two wrongs don't make a right. I agree. Both groups believed they were right, but if I made that person choose which message is correct, we hate oppression or versus we hate black people, I hope that person would choose we hate oppression, right? They say they both claim to be doing good. If I made that person choose which behavior is actually good, fighting against oppression or killing innocent people because they're black, I would hope that person would choose fighting against oppression. When they say both claim to be protecting their own, that is also true. Again, I would hope if I asked that person to choose which one is actually protecting their own, those who are advocating and fighting for black empowerment are those who are indiscriminately killing people just because they're black. I would hope that they would choose those who are advocating and fighting for the empowerment of their people. It is also true that two wrongs don't make a right, but when you look at what the Black Panthers actually did, not the propaganda, what the Black Panthers actually did, and when you look at what the KKK actually did, there were not two wrongs. There was one wrong, and that was the KKK.
Yeah, and it's pretty clear, you know, if people choose to do their research. And one of the things that, you know, and let me say this, and when I say do their research, I don't mean just get stuck on the court, you know, the murder charges and things like that, but also go in the claims of criminal activity. They also need to dig deeper and realize that a lot of the Panthers were acquitted for a lot of their charges, literally hundreds of the charges, the trumped up charges that were brought against them in an effort to infiltrate and bring them down by the U.S. government and the FBI. They were acquitted. And I always urge people to look at COINTELPRO, because COINTELPRO were FBI documents that were released to the public that outline, you know, that will outline exactly how the government intentionally, the FBI intentionally tried to, I guess, cause dissension within the ranks, and it worked. They were successful in a lot of ways. And to present this picture of dysfunction and this picture of hatred towards the public, the FBI actually even went as far as to cause infighting between the various civil rights groups, including Dr. Martin Luther King and his groups, and the Black Panthers and several others throughout the 60s, because there were more. A lot of Americans only know about the big names like MLK or, you know, Black Panther or Malcolm X. There are so many movements. There were so many players, and there's so much depth to it. And, you know, again, our minds and so a lot of times they're so narrow towards the complexity of the whole issue. So I also want to say that someone online made a really good point. You know, when I watched the documentary on the Black Panthers, when I look out online at the Black Lives Matter movement, I noticed that there's always diversity. Even with the Black Panthers received several donations, and they had several people who came out to support and rally for them that were European American. The Black Lives Matter movement has several people that are Euro-American, Hispanic American, Asian American, all different races that are supporting these two groups. But do you see any race outside of European Americans supporting the KKK? Like, that right there is another unique distinction for anyone who wants to think critically. So when I notice some of these news outlets trying to paint it as a black versus white thing, it never was a black versus white thing, because there's always been European Americans who have been supporting African American groups who are fighting against oppression and fighting for equality and civil rights. So again, it's only but so long you can run from it, because we have the internet now. So younger people are wising up. Hopefully they'll you know, continue to you know, share these things with the older generations. And I want to jump into well, first of all, let me just check your time. In respect to your time, do you have about 30 more minutes, or do you need to go?
Sure, I have 30 more minutes.
Okay, and the reason why I said that is because there's one more topic that I wanted to get to, and I actually have a caller that wanted to speak to a point that I've been hearing as well. It's kind of different than what we've discussed so far. But before I get to that caller, Troy from Facebook on this particular topic, he wanted to make the point that he said, name one instance when the Black Panthers terrorized white people, and why did the government shut down the Panthers and the KKK are still in effect? And I think we spoke to those things, but I wanted to acknowledge that because I wrote it down. And also William had a question. His was, why do some people feel pro-Black is anti-white? And again, thank you for those questions, William and Troy. And Nzinga covered both of those in previous statements. So I want to transition and pause really quick to welcome any new listeners that have joined us while we were in the middle of the show. And I want to welcome you to the Race Haven show and podcast, radio show and podcast. This is solutions-focused dialogue about race in America. My name is Scott Speed, and my guest host today is Dr. Nzinga Harrison. So previously, we discussed two topics. We discussed the Beyonce backlash, and we went into depth on that. We also discussed the rhetoric around the Black Panthers and who they really are and what they were really about. And now we're going to transition to a third topic, our third and final topic, which is this. There's been a segment of people within the African-American community who felt like Beyonce's performance was disrespectful towards the original women of the Black Panther Party. So a friend of mine that I went to high school with, his name is Lee. I want to bring him on so that he can share his perspective because, again, when I was looking for context, he reached out and shared some thoughts that he had about the performance that was totally different than the angles that we've covered thus far. And I've also seen this angle brought up in other places. So I wanted to have him come on, share his perspective, and get yours on it as well, Nzinga. So, Lee, are you there?
I am. How are you, Scott?
I'm doing good, my friend. This is my buddy. We go way back to high school, ninth grade, back. Philadelphia, Central High School, 256.
That's it, 256.
Oh, and also,
that's it.
A Howard University grad as well, just like Dr. Nzinga.
Oh, HU.
Exactly, HU, So I was actually going to say that, yes. So we have the high school connection, and then Dr. Nzinga, we are Howard University and University of Penn. I'm an alumni as well.
Oh, nice.
Yes, from a master's degree. So I'm feeling the energy. I should be in the room right there with you both.
You should be. I should have brought you on earlier.
That's it. It's an awesome show. It really is great to tune in. I'm really enjoying the perspectives. And Scott, I am just tremendously proud of you to continue to do what you do, man. This is what you've always done, and you're just keeping it up now. So it's great.
Thank you, man.
Yep. So I appreciate coming on.
Yeah, go ahead and share your perspective with us.
So, I'll touch briefly one point, and then I will. The last point is the imagery point that you led me into. The 2 points that I had that I wanted to consider is that, I do have issue with people. We are now accepting and rallying behind any kind of small showing of consciousness or political radical statements, and we're spending so much time arguing with the people who are opposed to that we kind of lose sight of what's actually happening or the actual tangible results from the statements. And so, I'm concerned with the fact that, like in several media outlets, I've heard that Beyonce is now being compared to some of the great activists we had in the past with this statement. Some are comparing it to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali, and thus far, and I could be wrong, somebody could correct me, but I haven't heard her make a definitive statement on what her position was, what her, what the video or performance actually was pushing toward, and what her actual tangible plan is for our empowerment. And so, for me, it's very troubling when we, give credit to artists who have not yet kind of crossed that barrier to say, this is what we're actually going to do. And those people, like I mentioned before, made definitive statements and had definitive programs set up that would have sustainable change that you could see right away. So for on that note, I think she's left us wondering, and I think even the doctor mentioned at one point, she said, I don't know what's in Beyonce's head. And that's kind of how I feel. When I see the video and I see the performance, we now got into an argument about what she has meant, and I think everybody has an interpretation about what she means. I think we can all agree that she did mean something. And so even in that point, maybe as an artist, this is what she left us with, and that's what art, sometimes wants to do. It leaves it up to interpretation. However, for me, I think where we are as a people, we need definitive statements about an agenda, and then we need some actual, sustainable change. So that was one point, and you can kind of go with that. And I'll make the second point a little faster here, but it's about the imagery that you led us into. And what I'm hearing is a constant reference to Beyonce's wardrobe, but particularly her background singers, as paying homage to the women of the Black Panther Party. I could answer one of your earlier questions. I consider the party to be one of my heroes. I've done a lot of research on the party, and I would strongly caution people to kind of analyze this sensationalism and recognize that there's a bit of a psychological danger. And I think the doctor, since she's talking about the brain, I know she can go into this even more intelligently than I. But it's a danger when we look at her, the energy she had, the clothing, the references, the dancing, the shaking and gyrating, and to constantly have the media compare that to an homage to women of the Black Panther parties who would have been all but against that kind of energy. The women of the Black Panther Party were against that kind of sexualized images, and they continuously did things to show that their intellect and to show their beauty in that way. They were no doubt beautiful and sexy, but I think anybody who studies them and understands it would understand that their strength came from their intelligence, their commitment to the Black family, and their commitment to fighting oppression, and that's what made them beautiful. And so when I hear people this constant reference that's made to her paying homage is dangerous, and I think the doctor talked about it with specifically for the children. And when we get into the idea of the childhood programming that she spoke of, well, I'm concerned about for our little girls and for our little boys, for that matter, when they're given this message that this was to pay homage to the women of the Black Panther Party. Now, we as adults can, do the research. We can say, well, we know what they really wore. But as children, they take these images in, and now as time goes, those images turn into memories, and those memories turn into history. And without a proper balance, they can then believe that the image that she displayed, to me, is in no way representative of the actual strength and beauty of the women of the Black Panther Party. So,
awesome. Thank you for that perspective.
Yep.
And I'll keep you on the line as well, Lee. Okay. But Nzinga, do you have anything to share in regard to Lee's comments?
Yeah, I think I agree with what Lee said. So if you look at the quote-unquote homage that Beyonce paid to the Black Panthers, it really was being dressed in black and wearing black berets, right? She also paid homage to Michael Jackson kind of with her own outfit. I do think it's important that you recognize the difference between how the women of the Black Panther Party presented themselves and divorce that from what this was, which was a Super Bowl halftime performance. And I also would like to reinforce what you said, which was that Beyonce hasn't come out and said what she was thinking, and often that's what artists will do to us, right? They put a canvas on the wall, you go in the museum, right, and you experience that through your own lens. And so that's really what Beyonce has done, is kind of put a piece of art out there for people to experience through their own lens. But it begs the bigger conversation as we're showing imagery to our children. We can show all types of imagery to our children, but we are the ones who are responsible for creating the context around that imagery, because that's the context, much like I said, what people learned about the Black Panthers when they were little, that's the context that they will carry with them forward into their lives, and then, revise based on their own experiences. But we lay the foundation for our young people, and so we certainly want to be cautious about the context that we put that in. So some might put it in a context and say, oh, they were overly sexualized. Other may put it in a context and say they were sexually empowered,
Mm-hmm. Right.
You just have to make sure you know what context you want to put it in for your children, kind of based on the beliefs that you want them to carry forward, and put it in that context. Rather than letting other people, I'll fall back on the Kwanzaa principle, which is kujichagulia, self-determination, to name yourself and define yourself rather than being named and defined by others.
Awesome. Do you have any response to that, Lee, or are you?
I think that's great, and I definitely agree that, it's putting it in the context, I'm hoping that my comments can, maybe shed some light and open some eyes for people to understand. And instead of just enjoying the performance, which, I know many of us did, who saw it, because actually I did not watch it, but because I have children, and I had children in the room, and I said to myself, again, these are the kind of images that I want to shield them from until, they can fully have an understanding of, the difference in entertainment and, references to historical events. So, I hope that some people can look at that and kind of go through that, and maybe that can spark conversation with people and their own children that, to really get into looking at the history and the power of that party. And again, I'm a bit biased because the party is one of my heroes for sure. So.
Awesome. Well, I want to ask you a question, Lee, because one of the things that, I want to do with this show is be transparent. I know that sometimes, we kind of say things and we assume because of who we're speaking to, they understand what we mean, but we may have some listeners that don't understand, and I want to make sure this show is speaking to all audiences and realizing we come from different cultures. So one of the things that you said that I would like for you to elaborate on is where we are as a people. Because one of the things that I notice is that when I post stuff on race, sometimes I'll get someone of European American descent that may respond to one of my posts frustrated, saying, why do we have to keep talking about this race stuff? And then I hear the words victim. I get that a lot. And the word, playing the race card, these various different things, and how anyone who puts their mind to it can have success. And, this theme that tends to come behind why are African-American people still focused on race-based issues when they're the ones making it an issue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can go on and on and on. So what I'd like you to speak to, just really quick, if you could enlighten the listening audience to what your definition of where we are as a people is, I think that would be great.
Sure. So I guess without getting too long-winded, I would say that currently in our state of being as people of African-American descent here, I would say that we are still experiencing considerable barriers as a group. We, at this point, have several members of our race who have achieved great things. However, as a group, we are still underrepresented in so many areas of life. We are economically disempowered, and so we continue to fight up against these barriers against in education, in housing, in healthcare. The list goes on and on. All the major areas of life sustaining, we are still behind. And I would say we're still in a fight for equality. We're still in a fight for justice. I think, again, with all, like you said, with social media now, there's a proliferation of all these incidents that the world should now see. And so I would think that some of those people who may feel as though we do have true equality, hopefully they're looking at some of these things and their eyes are opening up to the fact that there's still a disparity in the life chances of an African-American person versus other races. And so in this country, we still have work to do, in my opinion. And so, like you said, sometimes I as well assume that we all are starting from that same reference. But like you said, you have to, slow down for the people who aren't at that point. And hopefully, as has been a weapon for me, or it's been that we should continue to educate ourselves. And the more we educate ourselves, we start to open our eyes to, okay, like you say, while I may be doing successful, or while we may be able to pull out a few black people who are having success, we can then look at the majority, look at the people who are struggling on a day-to-day basis. And so if we really have a heart for those people, for all people, then we should be able to slow down and realize that in this country we still don't have full equality, and that should also, definitely be the goal, that and real justice.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate your contributions to the show today, Lee. So now what we're going to do is we're going to transition to our final segment, which is called the Solution segment. And this is the time where I'll ask Dr. Nzinga for her answer to solutions around the various topics that we discussed. And the way I framed it, and you can take it anywhere you want to, Dr. Nzinga, in terms of how you see us moving towards solutions. But the way I framed it was, how do we eliminate race-based polarization in America? Because I feel like all of these issues stem from the polarization that we see in the media that wants to have people pick sides. And by people picking sides, we never get to come together and talk about the root issues. So, and I feel like every single last one of these topics today stems from our inability to this point in history to figure out a way to come together to solve problems together and solve these pains, because again, it's a pain for us all. So do you have any final thoughts on that?
Sure. I think one of the first solutions is making it a safe topic to talk about. So your initiative, that you asked me to be a part of, Race Haven, is the perfect idea, with the idea being that Haven is a safe place. And so the second part is discussing race outside of emotionally charged situations. So I think that's what's great about Race Haven, is that it's always around. Any person can pose any question, and then, a flurry of feedback will come. What we have to make an extra effort to do with our feedback is to approach that feedback from a cognitive place, a place of thinking, rather than a place of emotion. And that's very difficult because a lot of us have had painful experiences as a result of simply of being Black. And then, on the other side, a lot of us have had painful experiences not being Black and being accused of things that they have not necessarily perpetrated, right? So it would not be fair for me to say white people this and that, because I hate to be that Black person that's like, I got a white friend, but I have tons of white friends who are allies in the fight for equality, right? And so it's not fair to say white people did this. Some white people, yes, did that. At the same time white people were doing that, there were other white people who were fighting for equality. And so I think we have to recognize that Black people, our emotions, people who are not Black have to recognize their emotions, and we have to somehow be able to say, just because that wasn't my experience doesn't mean that experience wasn't true. So even though my brain is telling me that this is a dangerous situation, I know that it's actually not dangerous. So let me intentionally tamp down my fear response and go into my cognitive space. And you can do that, right? You'll notice, even you're on Facebook and you read something, like the solution is for people to take extra note. When they see that picture of Beyonce with Black Panthers, just take a moment and just experience yourself, and you will see that you're engaged for a fight. You'll see that your breath is a little shallow. You'll see that your mouth is dry. You'll see that your heart is beating a little faster. You'll see that there's sweat on your palms, right? Your brain has engaged you for a fight. You 100% in that space because you're not really in a dangerous situation. You 100% have the ability to take note of all of those sensations and let your prefrontal cortex tell your emotional brain, this is actually not a dangerous situation. So I don't have to engage all of that emotion. I can engage my thinking. And if you just take that pause before you read that article or before you respond to that comment that engaged your emotional brain, you will be able to respond in a way that's not fighting. We have to stop fighting, and we have to start discussing. And the only way for us to do that is to stop pointing that one finger at everybody else and look at, what they say, you point one finger, you got four more pointed back at yourself. Turn your lens to yourself and recognize those things that trigger your emotional brain, and then challenge your thinking brain to convince your emotional brain that you're not in danger. You can actually talk about this. You can actually dialogue about this without fighting because you're not in danger. What's the worst that will happen? That person won't change their mind. You didn't die. You didn't bleed.
Right.
Your kids didn't get killed. Right? The worst thing that happened was that person didn't change their mind. The best thing that happened is maybe you planted a seed for them, and even better, maybe they planted a seed for you.
Well said. Thank you for coming on today and spending this time with us and educating us. This is the second week in a row that we've had a psychiatrist on. So, we're just learning so much, but I think that's important, because a lot of this does go deep into the psychological makeup and it's all about shared knowledge. And, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge with all of us. So that's our time for today. I want to thank everyone for listening. Thanks to our callers for calling in to share their perspectives. And again, a special thank you to my guest host, Dr. Nzinga Harrison. Be sure to join us next Thursday at 12 noon Eastern Time for another exciting dialogue. Visit blogtalkradio.com/Racehaven to listen to the podcast of previous episodes and join us online at the Racehaven Facebook group. If today's episode resonated with you, please share the podcast link on social media and with your friends. Racehaven is a safe place for people from diverse ethnic, religious, cultural, and political backgrounds to bring their race-based perspectives, questions, assumptions, frustrations, and experiences to engage in thoughtful, honest dialogue in an effort to lead a movement towards racial harmony in America. Remember, we are all smarter when we think together. Peace.
When we go out to eat, we never agree on where to go.
I want burgers. Pizza.
Tacos it is.
The one thing we do agree on is we all want unlimited high-speed data. That's why we switched to Metro PCS.
Stop by Metro PCS with the whole family and get 4 lines with unlimited LTE data for just $100, period. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figured out.
Coverage not available in some areas. Offers require port and of number not currently active on T-Mobile network. During congestion, the fraction of customers using more than 35 gigs per month may notice reduced speeds. Video streams at up to 40p. No tethering. See store for details and terms and conditions.
When we go out to eat, we never agree on where to go.
I want burgers. Pizza.
Tacos it is.
The one thing we do agree on is we all want unlimited high-speed data. That's why we switched to Metro PCS.
Stop by Metro PCS with the whole family and get 4 lines with unlimited LTE data for just $100, period. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figured out.
Coverage not available in some areas. Offers require port and of number not currently active on T-Mobile network. During congestion, the fraction of customers using more than 35 gigs per month may notice reduced speeds. Video streams at up to 40p. No tethering. See store for details and terms and conditions.